Hi everybody, I'm Ravid from Colombia, as I already said. Just before I begin, I just thought I would tell you everybody, I go to a Jewish day school in Colombia. That's like a really important fact for the talk. And I want to start with a story. A few days ago, I got to my school and we have prayer every morning. I got to my school and saw that the Jewish department decided to make like this assigned seats so people wouldn't talk during prayer, so it would be quieter. And so students did not like those ideas at all and decided to revolt against the teachers by putting numbers on their hands and saying they were Jews during the Holocaust, that our teachers were Nazi, and that our school was a ghetto. The Jewish department did not like that idea and was super mad, especially considering that each and every one of our students in my classroom and in my school are ancestors of Holocaust survivors. No, their ancestors are Holocaust survivors, and decided to tell us what we were doing, what they were doing, because I wasn't doing it, was irrespectful. And then during that talk, one kid stood up and said, "This was 75 years ago. Why should I care about this now?" And stories like this are the reason, the things that inspired my talk. Throughout history, against Jewish people and against Israel, there have been a series of very, very bad attacks. And the only reason behind them is that the victims were Jews and Jews deserve to die. Now, when we look back and try to find a point in history when anti-Semitism started, it's really, really hard. Because we could say it was 2018 with the new law Israel passed, the Jewish state nation law, that states that Israel is a Jewish state, but then we wouldn't have any way of explaining all the wars Israel had before that. So it can't be that one. We could say it was 1948 with the Declaration of Independence, but then we wouldn't have any way of explaining the Holocaust, which happened 5 years before. So it can't be that one either. We could say it was the first Zionist Congress, because it would make sense that if we want our own country, people would hate us. But then we wouldn't have any way of explaining the Dreyfus Affair, which inspired this in the first place, or explaining the Inquisition, or explaining the exile from our lands in the first place. So it's not something that started at a specific point in history, but something that has always existed, and something that we as Jews have always had to go through. Now, I went up to my Jewish history teacher and asked her what she thought was the reason it kept growing. Because if there's no reason for it to exist, why does it keep growing? And she said her reason was really, really weird, for me at least. She said, hate towards the other has always existed. It's not something only us Jews have to go through, but something everybody that's different has to go through. Now, the biggest difference between everybody else and us Jews is that everybody else have pride in who they are and they stick together to fight against it. We Jews let brotherly hate separate us and open a space for anti-Semitism to come in and keep growing. And that destroys us at the end. Now, for me, this made no sense. I come from a really tight community. I know everybody in my community. I study with everybody in my community. So not being close to them sounds really weird. But the more I looked into it, the more I realized it's true. Let's put it this way. In the world, there are around 14.6 million Jews. Out of those 14.6 million Jews, 7 million of them live here in the US, 6 million of them live in Israel, and the rest of them live all around the diaspora. Now, if you take the US out of the equation for a second, if you look at the Jews that live inside and outside Israel, lifestyle is pretty different. Because while in Israel, communities are little to non-existent, because Judaism tends to be taken for granted, because after all, you do live in a Jewish state, and like kosher is there for everybody, not going out Friday night is normal because, well, it's normal to keep Shabbat. When you live outside of Israel, you find yourself fighting against that identity question of what do I care more, my nationality or my heritage and my culture. And that identity question is solved a lot of the times by the communities, or what we in Latin America at least know as the Jewish bubble, which are friends and people who stick with you, have your same heritage, but also your same nationality. When it comes to the US, the big amount of Jews that live here tend to believe that the communities are not that necessary, because after all, even if you don't go to your JCC or you don't go to a Jewish day school, you will find Jews everywhere. And that's when their nationality overtakes their religion and takes them and makes them start believing things that aren't true. For example, since the Declaration of Independence in 1948 of Israel, There have been groups like Jewish Voices for Peace and Jews for Palestine, which are BDS supporting anti-Israel, anti-Zionist groups that believe that Israel should not be Israel and it should be Palestine. Now, before I keep going, I just want to make sure everybody knows Palestine was a name given to a territory that the Jews lived in before 1948 by the Romans when they beat us. Then the Brits came, the Brits wanted to leave, they made a resolution to give us our own territories back, a Jewish state. The UN approved it, and then when the Brits actually left, we declared our independence and changed it. Our name from Palestine to Israel. Palestine was never a name given to a territory where Muslims lived at. And then in 1967, which was 19 years after the Declaration of Independence of Israel, the Organization for the Liberation of Palestine came up, and that was the first time in history, throughout all history, that the name Palestine was given to Muslim people. Before that, the name Palestine was treated as the name of a territory where Jewish people lived at. Now we can go back. This group, like Jewish Voices for Peace and Jews for Palestine, are groups of Jews from the US and Canada who don't identify as the same type of Jews in Israel. And what they don't realize is that by not identifying as the same type of Jews in Israel and saying bad things about those Jews, which are different Jews, they're just creating more hate against all of Jews. And then again, it would be only in 1967 with the Declaration of Independence and the new Palestine organizations and things. But no, it's something that has been throughout our whole history. Does anybody know what Aelia Capitolina is? No? Okay, I'll tell you what Aelia Capitolina is. Aelia Capitolina was once Jerusalem. Jews lived there, and then they couldn't get along. They would fight about everything. They wouldn't agree on anything, so the Romans came in. They separated us, sent each Jew to a different place, and called Jerusalem Aelia Capitolina. And that was the first time in history the Jews lost Jerusalem and didn't get it back until 1964 with the Six-Day War. This happened also with Herzl. Herzl is known as the father of Zionism. Herzl was so assimilated, he talked bad about Jews, and what he said later on was used with Hitler against Jews during the Holocaust. So it's not something new. It's something that has always existed, something that has always made us weaker, something that has always let anti-Semitism grow. And what we as Jews have to realize is that it really doesn't matter if you're a Reform Jew or a Chabad Jew, if you're an American Jew or if you're an Israeli Jew. You can't talk bad about other Jews. We have to stick together and fight together. Because if people who hate us are able to put our differences aside and hate us all the same, we should be able to put our differences aside and fight against that hate all the same. Because if not, that hate will end with us. Thank you very much.